you are going through a grieving process, and you don't get space to grieve. You don't get space to figure out like how you feel about this. You don't get space to start processing it in these situations. You just don't. So in the middle of this huge kind of major like life event, you're processing this stuff on the fly and learning how to freaking put feeding tubes in your parent. It's, I mean,
it's a nightmare.
Yeah. And we are really not trying to sit here and like moan and complain. We're just trying to say, do not make the mistake of being like, la, 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 this is so hard. I can't deal with it. Da, 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 da. Because here's the thing, there's hard and there's hard. This is going to be hard no matter what. But there are some things that you can do to mitigate this so that you are not on your knees.
Welcome to Drinks with the Girls. Conversations for women over 40 around connection, change, and the power of female friendship.
Living well with stories to tell. I'm Karen, and this is Lisa.
We are moms and solopreneurs stepping into our own, diving into real conversations about things that matter to women in midlife.
We're here to spill the tea on everything that affects women in their 40s and beyond. Topics like loss and grief, changing relationships, launching kids, menopause, and reinventing ourselves in midlife. We are here to tackle it all.
Connect with us through a blend of our lived experiences, our friendship, the memory of our moms, plus a collection of real stories, honest conversations, and engaging interviews that will make women over 40 feel seen and remind them that they're not alone on this journey called life. Let's go.
Welcome back to Drinks with the Girls. This is the episode that we've been teasing / threatening you with.
Avoiding /
literally since we started this podcast. And it is on caregiving and being smack dab in the middle of the sandwich generation. But before we dive in, you know the drill. I am drinking Kettle One Botanical Vodka Spritz.
Okay.
And I am not a sweet girl. I do not like sweet drinks, and this is perfect. It's peach and orange blossom.
Yum.
And it's just the right amount of sweet.
Okay, now I'm jealous and feeling like I should have come much more armed to talk about this topic. So I am drinking a glass of Sparkle Hops. It's really good, by Pelican Brewing. It's basically an adaptogenic seltzer, and it's hop infused, and it's sparkling with acai, and it's really good. But yeah, I may need to. Although my problem is that lately, damn freaking middle-age menopause bullshit, I have been struggling to drink my red wine, and I'm like, oh no, this is not happening to me. So
you might have to switch to white.
I might have to what?
Switch to white.
Here's my problem, and it's a problem. And there's a story, of course, knowing me. I am such a bougie person when it comes to white wine. I can have like a mediocre, I used to be able to do Chuck Shock, can't do that anymore, but I can have like a decent red and be happy. Oh no, my white has got to be like the spendy stuff, or I can't drink it. Like it's just this bougie problem that my wallet can't afford. So that's honestly a big reason why. But I kind of like the white wines that taste like red wines that are a little more complex. Like I love my Sauv Blancs. I'm trying to think of some other ones. That's usually my go-to when I do white. So I think that I'm going to save my stomach and stick with the Sparkle Hops and give myself permission later to duck out and grab a glass in case we go there. Because yeah, there's a reason it's taken us a year plus to record this.
A year plus, yes. So buckle up. Let's just dive right in. So Lisa and I both have adorable fathers. Mine is 85. How old's Kenny?
He is 84.
Both of their wives have passed away, so they're on their own. And I've been through going through the caregiving experience since 2021 when my bonus mom had a stroke. And that was really trial by fire. And now the caregiving that I do with him is much more, I don't want to say easier, but easier.
Just say it.
How would you describe your situation with your dad?
Yeah. So my mom passed in 2017. And honestly, she was the healthy one. So this was never in the plan. Like my dad was just going to, ruin his health and drink himself to death and be fine. So when he lost her, his world tilted on a massive axis, as did mine. And so we have gone through a lot of stages since she passed in 2017. We're currently not at a very, very good stage at all, just in terms of communication and things like that. I've had to make some decisions, which we may or may not get into depending on my mood. He also lives out in the middle of nowhere, which is really not conducive to taking care of him. He has this ginormous house that's like 5,000 square feet with 3 different levels. Again, just a walking, like, broken hip waiting to happen. So that has been, and it's also like 45 minutes away from me. So that's been challenging. And my brother doesn't live locally. So it's been a whole thing.
It's a lot. And then you, on the other side, you are still in the trenches of parenting. You still have kiddos at home. They're teenagers. They still need parenting. They always need parenting. Even my 20-somethings need parenting. But yeah, so talk about being the juicy center of the sandwich generation.
Dude, okay, so I am about to take some poetic license here, but I think I will be forgiven. So y'all know I just went to my reunion, and my friend Mary there, and actually quite a lot of us were talking about caregiving and the sandwich generation and this, that, and the other. And she looked me dead in the eye. Was like, so here's the thing. It's not the sandwich generation. Like sandwich making implies like, oh, like little cucumber and tea sandwiches and just little bread and like little mayo and nicely pack them together. No, it's the friggin' panini generation. And the cheese is melting out the side and we are compacted and squished like no other. So Mary, forgive me if I took the poetic license. I shouldn't, but I just think that is so friggin' bang on for how we all feel. It's more intense than a sandwich. It really, really is. And
we are the mammograms of the sandwich
completely. It's like, how many metaphors can I mix? Like the Star Wars trash compactor? Like, it is not for the faint of heart. There is no friggin' manual. I mean, talk about no manual for parenting. This is like next level. And the bottom line is, we are really the first generation that has had to deal with this because the age brackets were different, right? People were having kids younger when like our moms were doing that, right? And people died younger, right? And so because that's been tweaked, our generation just got slapped with this whole other thing that nobody could have prepared us for. And it is freaking rough.
Well, that is one thing, like a lot of things we talk about on this podcast, and how our generation was kind of blindsided because nobody talked about stuff, right? I'm trying to educate my kids about what's in store for them. And I'm also trying to set up my situation where they don't have to make the decisions. The decisions are already made, whether it's my healthcare, my financial situation, whatever, it's already made.
Yep.
They don't have to go through that stress. They just have to execute.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, I think well, I don't want to speak for everyone, but like, I think a lot of people have gotten the memo on the living will and the trust and that kind of stuff. Listeners, if you have not set up a living will or a trust, you need to do this for your kids and for the people that come after you. People freak out because it's death, and I get it, but you absolutely have to do it. I'll try to throw some resources in, but there's all sorts of ways that you can do it, but you must, because it is, as anybody will tell you that's been through probate, it's a friggin' nightmare. And it's hard enough to lose a parent, much less having to deal with that on top of everything. So
I remember when I was getting my living trust done and just like all the scenarios that the attorney was asking me. And I'm just like, oh my gosh,
I know.
do I really have to think about that? But
I know.
It wasn't easy, but you have to do it
You
because
gotta
you do
do
not
it.
want your kids to suffer.
I know. My husband and I sat in the parking lot of our lawyer's office and just like, so, and like read all the scenarios and we looked at each other, was like, Jesus, this is friggin' intense, but we have to do it. We have to do it. So,
Yeah. So it's just not the physical caregiving, although I want to dive into that a little bit at some point, because when my stepmom had her stroke, it was physically
Yep.
taxing. It was
Yep.
physical caregiving 24/7. But there's so many other pieces to caregiving. Like you don't even have, like you're 45 minutes away from your dad. I'm 35 minutes away from my dad, right?
Yep.
It's the scheduling, it's the medications, it's remembering things, it's
Yep.
anticipating, it's managing emotions, right?
I can do everything just fine on my own, and screw you for thinking I can't. And then the dominoes are falling everywhere with the driver's license, with the this, with the that.
Yeah, and I know you're not going to be surprised by this, but did you know that women carry 70 to 80% of the household's emotional labor, even in equal partnerships?
Nope.
And so this just gets amplified when you are the central hub for all the generations.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I want our listeners to walk away from this episode with is, if your parents are still around, that's a blessing. And if they're relatively healthy, it's really, really important that you start to get prepared and just mentally, if nothing else, plan for the what ifs.
Yep.
Because in the middle of the night, my stepmom had a stroke. She was 79, I believe, and relatively healthy person, right? Has a stroke in the middle of the night, just changed her life in an instant. Paralyzed on half her body doesn't move, bedridden, on a feeding tube, incontinent, obviously, can speak, and has a glimpse of who she is in there. Like, so she's not totally not her, but she's not really her. Not only are we trying to figure out what we're going to do with her, we're trying to figure out what are we going to do with my dad. Because she's now gone. She's in the hospital. She ends up going to rehab. Like, she's gone for, I think it was a couple months, right? So we're also caring for him and our own emotions, our own feelings, our kids whose grandparents' lives have just been upended, right? So when things like this happen, and they do, it's just really good if you try to prepare yourself for the what ifs. And there were so many hard parts of this whole situation. But one of the things that I want to highlight is just the gendered expectations, because I have 3 sisters, so there's 4 daughters, right? No brothers in this family. And my dad, I remember him, he was on the phone. My stepmom was in the hospital. We were all just freaking in, trauma response mode. And he's on the phone with a friend telling them what had happened. And he said, thank goodness I have daughters, because I wouldn't know what to do. And basically my 3 sisters and I, we ran the ship. We handled, I want to say 97% of the things. I mean, he was the ultimate, sign off on things. He was the ultimate financial, hub. But we were the ones running the show because he was paralyzed, basically, in like mentally and emotionally paralyzed.
You've talked before about like you were basically doing full on nursing care, but not knowing how to do it. And the fact that he was like, well, get in there and figure out how to do it, right? That whole piece.
Yes, that was the piece. Yes. And when this originally happened, I said to my family, I cannot do the nursing part, like the blood and the fluids and that piece. It's hard.
Yep.
That's not my strength. And, I'm like, whatever I need to do, I'll do. But I'm not doing that. And I thought I made it clear to my dad, but clearly he wasn't hearing me, because when it came time for my stepmom to come home, and I mean, she cannot move. We have to turn her in bed. She cannot even like move herself in bed. So we have to turn her, we have to change her. We have to learn how to do her feeding tube. We have to learn how to do all her medications, right?
We have to coordinate the doctor, the speech therapist, the PT, and so it's just a lot. And when the nurses came to teach us how to do the feeding tube, I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. And, I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say that, but it's just how I felt. It was a boundary I was setting. And my dad basically said, get in there, nurse, get in there. And so I was still at the place where I could not hold a boundary with him. And I was feeling guilty. And so I went in and I learned how to do it. And come to find out, I did it. And my sisters and I were her primary caregiver for, I don't even know how long it was. It felt like 10 years. It was probably 2 weeks. And then we realized really quickly we could not do this and we had to hire help.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's when you are in the thick of it, when things happen and you're not expecting them to happen, you don't know how you're going to react. You don't know how you're going to handle them. And then to deal with all of the emotions, your own, your siblings, your parents, your kids, and as women, that's what we do. We hold all the things, right? So
Yeah.
I'm amazed that I didn't
I am too.
go to the funny farm.
My name is Karen Shatafian, and I am a shameless coffee addict and empowerment coach for women, and my love language is authenticity. My mission is helping women unapologetically design a life they're in love with. Because what the hell are we waiting for? My website, KarenShatafian.com, has all my coaching packages and free offers like my Midlife Reclamation Guide. In it, you'll find tools to help you decide how to create the most inspired and empowered version of yourself and your life. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram talking about ways women can show up for themselves after decades of showing up for everyone else. Join me as we throw off the shackles and live our best freaking lives. See the show notes for all the details. Cheers.
Mine was a little different, but on that similar vein. So when my mom got sick, my parents had long-term healthcare insurance, so they could hire help.
Can I just interject something
Yeah.
really quick while you're deciding how
Yeah.
much you want to share? My parents' long-term care insurance did not cover in-home care. It
Yep.
only covered if they were in a rehab facility.
Yep.
So my dad had to shell out, tens of thousands of dollars a month to have, because she needed full-time care 24/7. I would just, encourage you, if your parents have a plan, look at the details, because
Yep.
you think, oh yeah, I have long-term care insurance. It covers everything. It does not.
No, it doesn't. And shout out to Karen Van Voorhis, who did our Smart Financial Moves episode. She has some great connections in that area. So if you are in panic mode right now and going like, what the heck, I would really encourage y'all to reach out to her. She's lovely. If you haven't watched that episode, you need to. We're going to have her back. But she has some great resources. My parents' particular plan did cover in-home care. But my dad was still very much like he wasn't going to do the dirty work kind of stuff. And when he did, it was bad. I'm not going to get into it on this podcast, but there were some things that he did that I don't know that I'll ever forgive him for, just in terms of how the care was handled. But it is amazing to me how the default is the daughter. And I can very much remember. So at this time, we were living on their property. They had this huge farm. We were living in a cottage, 2-bedroom cottage on the property, and my kids were little. So we just got back from overseas. So Liam would have been 6 maybe, and G was 3, just turned, right? So we were still at the giving them baths every night stage, right? And the you can't leave them alone stage, right? And they're literally in the bathtub, and my husband comes and says, your father's on the phone. And I was like, I can't talk to him. I need to call him later. I'm giving the kids a bath. And he told him, my dad's like, no, I need to talk to her now. So my husband goes over and takes over in the bath, and I pick up the phone. I'm like, yeah, Dad, what is it? And he said, your mom's in a lot of pain. I need you to come up and help her. And I'm like, and at this point, he had not hired care, right? And I was like, Dad, like, I can't, I'm here with the kids. Like, well, Martin has to watch him. And I was like, Dad, that's not okay. And he was like, basically accused me of being a bad daughter. And so I went up, and he didn't have anything going. He was just wanting to play captain of the manor and like deal with stuff in his office. So I went in there and I helped my mom get up and try to make her comfortable and do, and she was very emotional, and try to like help her and get her to the point where she was peaceful enough that she could get some rest. And I came back down and I looked at my husband and I was like, I don't care what we need to do. We are moving as soon as possible because this is my future. And it's not okay, because if I'm here, he's not going to hire help. And just saw my life like flash before me. And I would say, gosh, maybe a year after that, maybe two, we moved and bought a place in town, because I was just like, this is going to be the excuse, and it's not okay. And as soon as he brought the whole bad daughter thing down, I was like, this is going to be toxic in a way.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Well, and I haven't looked into it. I don't know the numbers, but I'd be willing to bet that it's more a gendered thing as far as the men just sitting back and letting the women handle the things.
Yep.
And I don't want to, I feel like we say this all the time. I don't want to bash my dad, bash men. I just think it's, especially his generation, I think it's easy for men to sit back and let women do that kind of caretaking work, right?
Yep.
And unfortunately, it caused a lot of resentment. I built up a lot of resentment toward him, and it took me a long time to work through that. I mean, I would call my sisters, and I was lucky. I had 3 sisters I could vent to and could share the load with. Don't get me wrong; it was a train wreck at the beginning because we were not on the same page, and I thought I was going to lose relationships with them because of it, but we worked it out. It took me a long time to unhook from the resentment I had built up toward my dad during that time.
I feel that. I don't know that I've completely unhooked from that piece, and now dealing with him as he ages even more. And I mean, stubborn doesn't even begin to label it. We're actually not speaking at this point because it's just been so friggin' toxic, and I had to make some choices for my own mental health and my family, and I love him dearly, but allowing myself to continue to be treated the way he was treating me was, I just had to make a choice. My husband's got some really serious health issues right now, and that was just kind of the last straw for me. So, I hope it gets repaired. I'm very grateful because my brother is there. He wasn't always in the picture helping, and he has been freaking amazing. I honestly don't know what in the hata I would do without him. And it isn't even just the physical stuff, because he doesn't live anywhere near. He lives down in the Bay Area. It's the dealing with the stuff, because here's the other thing, listeners, that is one of the biggest stressors. Like, I don't know what's bigger, right? It just comes at you from all directions in that panini press. But the whole journey, and I get it, like, it must be hard to lose your independence and be able to drive, like, all these things. I totally understand it. But I think the piece that's been so rough for me about my dad is like, yes, it sucks. Yes, there's all sorts of difficult stuff that goes through it. But why do you have to take it out on everybody else around you and just be mean and horrible and nasty? That's the piece that I'm dealing with, that I can't wrap my head around, right? So, the other thing, listeners, that you're going to have to deal with is all the myriad of decisions and helping them get to the point where they need to make decisions that they may not like, but are the best thing for them, i.e. giving up driving, i.e. giving up living alone. Like, there are so many freaking things, and don't kid yourself, right? They will say, and my dad said it too, oh, I'll know when it's time. I was talking with our trust lawyer, and I remember she said, Lisa, do you know how many times I sit in this office and hear people putting together a living trust and will, and they say, I'll know when it's time? I promise you, in 25 years of doing this, not one person has ever known and acted that way. So, like, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer, listeners, but like, just be prepared,
Well, and I think that speaks to what a huge deal this is, not only for our parents who are, like you said, losing their independence, losing their health.
losing their freedom. But also for us who have to make these decisions, step in and make these decisions. And, guess what? Well, I don't know. I'll speak for myself. In the beginning, I'm the baby of the family. So I reverted right back into that role, right? Just, be seen and not heard. And, everybody knows more than me. So I'm just going to be quiet. I don't want to disappoint my dad. I'm certainly not going to challenge him. So I had to work through all of this internal bullshit in order to just be able to care for my stepmom and now care for him. And luckily I've done that and I feel so much better about it now, but it is a process. And if you ignore it or deny it or push it away, it's just going to grow. So I just encourage listeners, if you are going through something like this, to just look at what you need. Look at your patterns, look at your relationship, look at how you are handling things. Because yes, it's important to care for our parents, but it's also important to care for ourselves.
Yeah. I can relate to a lot of your story, but I think the piece that I can most relate to is the boundary issue. Because let me tell you, boundary setting with a parent is one of the most difficult things I have ever had to do in my life. I mean, it's one of the things I'm dealing with in therapy right now is just boundaries where my dad is concerned, because it really, I've gotten better at sounding boundaries just in general as I'm older. My therapist that I'm working with now is just like, I think that the boundary issues you have with your dad have affected a lot of your boundaries with other people. And she's 100% right. And God, I can feel how I felt, and I know the room where I was in, and I was getting ready to leave, and Martin had taken the kids, and my parents walked out after me. This is when my mom was still relatively okay, although she had been diagnosed with cancer, and the Parkinson's diagnosis had either just happened or we were getting there. And they said, "We just don't understand why you're so angry with us. We have the right to live our lives the way we want to live them." And I looked at them and I said, and this was me probably sticking up for myself for the first time. And I said, "I completely agree. You 100% do. It doesn't mean I have to agree with them. And it doesn't mean that I can't be angry for you for what I consider shitty decisions that are going to cause problems later." And they just looked at me. Like, I think that's probably the most direct I'd ever been with them. And it was like they didn't know what to say. And from that time on, I was very much like, okay, like, yep, they have the right to do, like, my dad has the right to do all the stuff that he's doing now, but it's not.
So was it your mom who said that? I'm curious. Was it your
Yes,
mom?
it was my mom.
Yes, because your dad is like my dad, okay? They are very similar. And if my dad even recognized I was angry and then verbalized it to me, I think I would fall out of my chair and pass out. Because he is so wrapped up in his own feelings and his own life. He does not even, and even when my sisters were in the thick of it, when they and I were in the thick of it, taking care of our mom, he never thought about how we were doing. He never asked us.
Yep.
He never thought, is it too much? How are you? Do you want to go home and see your kids? So you want to go take care of those other people that
are like
dependent on
my
you?
day off from caregiving, not. No, and I think that is really, they really are alike, because that is definitely a blindness that my dad has, and that has really contributed to a lot of the toxicity I'm dealing with right now, because it's that, yes, I have the right to make my own decisions kind of thing. But then in his mind, because he has the right to make those decisions, I have to actively support them. So I need to be not doing things like telling him he can't drive anymore, or driving out to see him all the time, or doing all this stuff, or helping him with this or helping him with that, because that's what he needs to live independently and live out there. And the fact that I'm saying, "No, Dad, that is not a guarantee. And guess what? I'm not a bad daughter. In fact, I've done stuff for you that most people wouldn't, and hung on longer than anybody, and put up with what you have treated me like for longer than anybody really should have.
And I think, too, sure, yes, we get to decide what we do with our own lives.
Mhm.
They get to decide
Yep.
what they get to do until they don't. Until it's a point where it's dangerous, like when my dad had to stop driving.
Yep.
It's like, look, I know, and I ask him sometimes too, because my one sister and I specifically take him to like his doctor's appointments and things. He does have a caregiver now, so we do that less, but
Mhm.
I will ask him when we're in the car, how do you feel about not being able to drive anymore? I'm sure that's really hard. And then he'll go into it,
Mhm.
but I could not, he crashed into his garage. I'm like, Dad, that could have been a 7-Eleven. You could have crashed into people.
Yep. Yep.
And he got it. He didn't put up a fight, which I was
Oh,
thankful for.
I wish that
But
was my
it's like,
situation.
I wish too, because I know what stress you're under. But I think, yes, you get to decide until you don't. And it's like
Yeah.
with my dad. He lives in this condo that's upstairs. It's not 5,000 square feet, but it's up. He walks up these concrete stairs that he's already fallen down one time, but like you said, it's just a hip break waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And I've tried my damnedest to get him to go to a retirement community. I've taken him to some lovely ones. We've looked at all the positives. We've
Yep.
done all the things. And he thinks I'm sending him to jail.
Yep.
So I'm like, you know what, Dad? Okay.
No, and that's the point you have to get to where it's like, all right, this is going to end in a horrible, awful way, but I have done everything that I possibly can and be at peace with it. And, I think, again, one of my real frustrations with my dad is I have had to push him and push him and push him, and he is very just downright nasty about it, right? Like, I was the one that found the issues in his trust that, frankly, his lawyer didn't find. I was the one that found the issues with his insurance policy. I was the one that hired the caregiver that he refused. You know what I mean? On and on and on. And it's like, I'm a horrible person for doing that, right? And he fights it and fights it and fights it, and then I'm awful. And then, oh, lo and behold, okay, we're going to do it. Do I get an apology for being treated like that? Nope. It's just like, okay, here we are. There's next. So in his mind, part of the reason that this break has occurred is he blames me for taking away his driver's license and tangentially my brother. And it's like, Dad, I would get calls all the time, because this is a small town, from people who know him. Like, he got lost again. He called for, da da da. Every time he would show up, there'd be a new ding on the car. I'm sure he was getting into accidents and not reporting them. When people would drive with them, they'd call me and be like, he went the wrong way in a roundabout. Like, all the time I was getting these calls. And it's like, he won't hear it. And so the fact that I was finally like, look, I have to do this because someone's going to get killed. He went off the friggin' deep end and was going to hire a lawyer to fight it, wrote an appeal, turned it into the DMV, and was expecting them to be able to give him a court date and this and that and the other. And instead, you know what they did? Like a month later, they turned around and said, we are not only going to not give you a hearing, we're revoking your license because of medical concerns. Because he doesn't understand. And I tried to explain to him that by fighting it, he gave them permission to look into his medical files, to look into the insurance, all those things. There's no way they would have pulled his license by just little old me saying, I'm concerned and this is what I've witnessed. And I mean, it got to the point well before that where I wouldn't let the kids drive with him. And I was like, I will not drive with you. You either let me drive or you can follow behind, but we're not doing it. So, I think that is my thing, is just like the way he has gone about it has been so toxic and so mean and just so like personally egregious. And recall, I'm the only one left, right? I'm the one that's inviting him out to dinner every week and doing the things and hiring the caregiver and doing all the stuff. There's no one else that wants to put up with it anymore. And I think that somehow in my mind, I don't know why I thought this, but somehow in my mind, I guess I thought if I was the loyal daughter and stuck it out when nobody else would and did all the things and excused it and just like looked the other way and took all those phone calls and then shielded him, I guess I thought it would give me a pass. on the way he has been treating me. And it hasn't. And that has probably been the most hurtful part of this is I get it. I get that it's like unrealistic to expect that, but I never, ever thought that he would turn on me after that. And I think that that is why I just hit my breaking point is I was like, I can't even process that this is what's happening. And, I've gone back into therapy because as everybody can tell, this is a lot of friggin' emotions for me. So much resentment. I mean, just weird stuff, right? Like being angry at my mom for dying first. Like there's so many like layers that this all brings up. It's just so damn complicated. And I feel like no one gets out of this unscathed. I don't care if you have the best relationship with your parents, like they've got it all dialed in, like they have the living will, all this stuff that we're talking about. Nobody goes through this unscathed. It's just, I don't know how you feel, Karen, but I just don't feel like it's possible not to have something happen.
Hey there, I'm Lisa Corachella McDowell, your Midlife Pacific Northwest princess, here to guide you in the art of next leveling your life. I'm passionate about women's health and wellness in midlife, especially for moms parenting kids with unique needs like I do. I truly believe we can learn, grow, advocate, and care for the planet while taking care of ourselves and our families. And I'd love to help you do the same. And I'm beyond excited to tell you about my membership for maxed out mamas just like me, the Empowered Parent Collective. It's a space for parents to confidently advocate for their kids, build inclusive communities, educate themselves, and find balance and support along the way. To find out more about the Empowered Parent Collective, my classes, wellness offerings, parenting tips, advocacy resources, and exclusive Drinks with the Girls goodies, head to nextlevellifewithlisa.com. Let's survive and thrive in the messy middle together.
I think it's the minority of, people that don't have to deal with this on some level. I mean, maybe not to the extent that, I feel like my example is pretty extreme with my mom, my mom's stroke. And, your example, I feel like is extreme also. Hopefully it's not like that for everybody, but I think if you're not prepared mentally, if you're not prepared with how to even go about handling the logistics, the paperwork, the stuff, like it's just, there's just so much. And that's why we wanted to do this podcast, because we know we're not the only ones. And I know there are more extreme situations out there, like
100%.
But, you might not be able to relate with our situation totally, but I think the fact that we as women, as daughters, are dealing with this on a massive level, I think is, that's the through line. And also raising children. And I'm not raising my children, but there's still an emotional load there with my kids too. My daughter who calls me, can you please proofread my, my intro letter for my job and blah, blah, which I'm happy to do. But it's like, there's always things. There are always things.
Yeah. There's always stuff that comes up. And, I was going to mention this at the beginning of this episode and I forgot, but interestingly, after my mom passed, I started a support group on Facebook. I think I've talked about this before on the podcast,
Yes,
but it's called Smithies with Elders, and it is for my alumni. I wanted to keep it manageable and really have some confidentiality to it, which is the reason it wasn't just like every person on the face of God's earth kind of thing. And it's grown to over 1,000 women. I have co-hosts now to help me vet people to make sure that they really did indeed go to the college. And the reason for that is, again, we're trying to keep it confidential. So we put in rules, all that kind of stuff. But, I really dedicate this podcast to all the women in that group who have shared their stories, who have reached out for help, who have, asked for advice on any topic you can possibly think of related to this. And, I would love to say that there are a lot of resources out there for this, and I'm going to fill up those show notes, but there just aren't. There aren't. And I think part of the takeaway I would leave listeners with is do this research now when you're not brokenhearted or stressed or in the thick
or
of
having
it.
to make a decision
Exactly.
about something major tomorrow.
Yeah. Do it now and try to get some resources lined up, because I'll tell you what, even, my parents had living wills and all these things. But I tell you, when my mom was in her final days in the hospital bed, my dad's grief overrode all of her decisions, all of them. And I found myself about to have to file a grievance with the hospital ethics board just to make sure that her wishes were respected and go against my family in the middle of my grief. And power of attorney and all those things are all fine and dandy, but it at the end of the day, there's things that can happen. So get yourself a good freaking lawyer. If you can't afford a lawyer, there's online forms that you can at least do a will and a trust for you. Talk to your parents. I know it's so hard. This is an awful, shitty subject that no one likes to talk about, but better to do it now than when you find yourself in a situation like Karen and I are in, because it's brutal. It's brutal.
And talk to your siblings if you have siblings, because we, a lot of the things I think that we went through maybe could have been avoided. I don't know. I feel like we just had to go through them, honestly. But I have a client right now, and she's going through just something traumatic like this as well with her parents and her siblings. And her siblings, they are ripped apart because they are all handling it differently, and they are not listening to each other. And the oldest feels like he has to be in charge, even if it goes against what dad and mom want. And it's just, it can be a shit show.
Yep.
There's the potential for that. So not only get your ducks in a row logistically with the paperwork and stuff, but also emotionally and relationally with your siblings and with your parents. Have that hard conversation if you haven't already.
Because, I mean, look, this is hard enough, but understand you are going to be starting the beginning of a grieving process. You are going through a grieving process, and you don't get space to grieve. You don't get space to figure out like how you feel about this. You don't get space to start processing it in these situations. You just don't. So in the middle of this huge kind of major like life event, you're processing this stuff on the fly and learning how to freaking put feeding tubes in your parent. It's
a nightmare.
Yeah. And we are really not trying to sit here and like moan and complain. We're just trying to say, do not make the mistake of being like, la, 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 this is so hard. I can't deal with it. Da, 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 da. Because here's the thing. There's hard and there's hard. This is going to be hard no matter what. But there are some things that you can do to mitigate this so that you are not on your knees.
And there is, at least down here, I found there is support. You just have to dig for it. There's support online. I was just listening to a podcast the other day. I will dig it up and we'll put it in the show notes. But and it was a younger woman who was going through a caregiving situation. But it was she gave a very good detailed list of all the things that you need to do. Like there's a senior center here. I mean, even for my dad, like once my mom passed and we went through all of that. Now my dad's alone. And so I reached out to the senior center. They have activities, they have transportation, they have meals, right? Like, cause the worst part is him being alone, cause that's what is detrimental for seniors, right? Is the loneliness. But he fights me on it. So I've had to give up that fight too. Yep. I'm like, Dad, if you'd rather sit alone in your condo with your Sudoku and your crossword puzzles, there's nothing else I can do.
100%.
And it has helped me unhook from the guilt when he calls me and tells me how bored and lonely he is.
Yep.
I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
You're making that bed.
Yep. 100%. Yep. And that's the same thing with my dad. And it's like, I'm really lonely. I'm this and that. It's like, okay, Dad, well, you're choosing. I get that you're in a place that, is familiar to you, that you feel like, you have some independence and you feel like you're going to give that all up if you go somewhere else. But it's just, I think for me, one of the things I just can't wrap my head around is, and that's one of the reasons I had really gotten frustrated with my parents. It's like the decisions you're making are making it harder for you to have what you want to have at this time in life. Like I remember, like I said, they had this huge, ridiculous house. And I was like, Mom, why don't you guys, there's freaking 5 bedrooms. Okay. This house was built to have guests like 24/7, right? Like my wedding was there. It's bananas. I said, You don't have guests coming in like that anymore. There's 4 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. Why don't you make it into an apartment so that when the time comes, you will be able to have a caregiver so that you can stay in this house like you want. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, we'd never get our money back on that." And I was like, wow, like that's not even the point. So that is a huge challenge, is them just doing stuff that is 100% detrimental. Like they say, "Oh, I want to be in my own house. I want this, I want that." And then you try to support them and they fight every single thing that could support that.
Okay, quick pause. Have we talked about the Pod Squad lately?
Oh, the Pod Squad. You mean our email list /VIP lounge /digital wine club?
Exactly. So, listeners, if you're not on it yet, you're basically making life harder for yourself when it comes to podcasts.
Like trying to scroll for show notes while speed walking on a treadmill. Wait, what was that link again? Oh, no. Grab the side rails.
Or pulling up that book we mentioned while you're in the Starbucks line and then realizing everybody else moved up 3 cars and now you're that woman.
We've all been there. That's why we made the Pod Squad. You'll get new episode alerts every week with direct links. Easy to listen, easy to share.
And show notes straight to your inbox. So when we drop a life-changing product, book, hot tip, or yummy new drink, you're not rummaging through your memory like a woman searching for her reading glasses when they're on top of her head.
It's organized, it's helpful, it's for you, babes.
So join the Pod Squad. The link is in the show notes. Just tap it.
Snacks, sarcasm, solidarity.
And obviously, fighting the patriarchy.
We write at dawn.
Not only is it detrimental for them, not only are they not able to get what they want, it's detrimental for us.
Yep.
When I was trying to, show my dad these great communities that are around for seniors, I was sitting at lunch with him and I said, what are you afraid of? What is your biggest fear?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why don't you just wait until something happens? So again, he wants us. He's telling me, I'm going to wait until I fall and break something. I'm going to wait until something tragic happens.
Yep.
And then in the middle of the crisis, I'm going to want you to make the decision.
Exactly. Right? Like my dad, something very similar. My brother flew up here and took them all to these really nice places and this and that and the other. And the thing that my dad was fixated on is, oh, the one I really want to go to doesn't have a waiting list. They said I could call whenever. And I was like, Dad, and he just won't hear me on this. I was like, Dad, I promise you, if you fall and hurt yourself and go to the hospital, they are legally responsible for you. They will not release you against medical advice. That's friggin' ER. That's a fantasy. That's like Grey's Anatomy, okay? It's like the person walks away and, whatever. That does not happen in real life, okay? Because they know they'll get sued. They're not going to release you. You will not be able to go back home. You will at best be able to go to a rehab facility and you won't get to pick it. It'll be what they decide, right? With the insurance company. He's like, well, no, then I would just go to the assisted living facility. I said, Dad, they're not going to let you do that because of the liability. It doesn't work that way. If you get on the wait list and you put the $500 deposit down, at the very least, when you get in that situation, you can say to the hospital, look, I have this deposit down. It's waiting for. I said, it doesn't work that way. And he just.
My point too to my dad was, don't you want to choose? Like, don't you want to take control of your life and decide, if this happens, this is my next step? And don't you want to relieve your children of the burden?
Yep.
But no,
he
doesn't.
Nope. 100%. And, my brother talks about, like, for my dad, control is the ultimate thing. He wants control over relationships, over health, over happiness, over. That is his number one concern. And while I understand that, he is cutting off his nose to spite his face. And the decisions that he's making are actually making it more difficult for him to stay out there. And yeah, he's exactly the same way. And it's like they're just paralyzed in place. And they feel like they have to hold on to every single thing that has been in the recent past. And clinging on to that is the most important thing. And it's a rare person that's able to be like my aunt and uncle. They're amazing. my aunt has a lot of health problems, and they were really struggling to get care, and it was this whole big epic thing. They lived in Vermont. The winters there are a nightmare. And so they found this place in Virginia, and my dad was like, that's so expensive. Like, why would they do that? I'm like, I don't know, because now they don't have to worry about anything, and there's doctors on staff there, and they've downsized and figured it out. And their kids don't have to deal with it. And I asked her, I've talked to her many times about this, like, how does this feel? And she's like, well, I got to say, like, I'm surrounded by old people, which is hard to get used to. She's like, but I get it. That's reality. And I was like, well, how do you feel? And she said, I'm telling you right now, the benefits outweigh any of the negative pieces. And now that I'm here, it was a nightmare to do this. I can relax and know that I'm taken care of. They have their own little apartment there, and they don't have to worry about any of it. But they did the research and their due diligence when they were still sprightly enough to deal with it. And I feel like that subset of people is minuscule.
And I think it's maybe easier to do it as a couple. Like I'm sure if my mom was still around, my bonus mom, and my dad would do whatever she said, right?
Yep.
So if she
Yeah,
said, "Hey,
totally.
let's go to this community. We have built-in friends there.
Yep.
We'll have all these activities. We won't have to worry about that." Then he would have been okay.
Yep.
But my dad, it's not so much a control thing for him. It is I don't know how to get out of my comfort zone thing. I don't know how to make decisions that are uncomfortable, that are potentially scary, that are new.
Yeah.
That's why he won't even go to lunch at the senior center, because he just doesn't know how to do new things. And I've had to let go of expecting him to be somebody he's not, which is hard. Yeah. I mean, through this whole thing, I've seen a whole different side of him that, I guess it's normal, as we grow and age, our relationship with our parents and our view of our parents grows and changes, because we're not kids anymore. We don't have them on that pedestal, or we don't see them the same. And it's hard to watch your parents decline. Like it's hard.
Yep. No matter what the relationship is. And, you know, going back to what you said about, oh, if my mom would have been here, I am continually amazed at how much I'm now just finding out that my mom filtered for my dad and enabled in a lot of freaking ways. And I think that speaks to the whole patriarchy, women are the caregivers thing, because I mean, I'm hearing about stuff now I would have walked ages ago, right? And I mean, look, you do you, you're the only one that can decide if a marriage is over, and that's not a good place for you to be in. So I'm not like judging her for that, but she set up a dynamic that when she was gone, like, this is what happened. And
my sisters and I talk about that too. We talk about that exact thing. That's like she set us up, because she enabled him to the nth degree, and now that's what he expects, and he can't really function.
Exactly. Right. Well, I just find the substitute, and that's fine, because I've never had to take responsibility for my actions. I've always, like, when people got too close or they did things that I didn't want them to do, I just screamed and yelled, and then they ran the other way, and it was fine. And now here we are. And I think, to get to that point that you and I have gotten, where it's like, this is going to get even uglier, if possible, than it could have been. And just to extricate yourself from the guilt, from the, this is my fault, from the, I could be doing something. And I think that's kind of where we are both at. We've had to take different paths. Like, you are still involved. I am tangentially involved at this point by choice. Yeah, listeners, if you expected a nice like wrap up to this episode where we gave you these loads of resources and gave you like these pearls of wisdom,
we're going to do that right now.
We're going to do that
right now. We are going to do that right now, because we do not leave our listeners hanging. Although Lisa and I could talk about this topic ad nauseum for hours and hours, but we always like to leave you with some takeaways. And so I looked up, like, what is important for women in the sandwich, panini, mammogram generation. What's important for us to know?
The
first one we talked about is setting boundaries, right?
Yep.
Even the really fucking hard ones, because let me tell you, there are going to be some hard ones.
also be realistic about what you can do. Like my sisters and I were in la la land when we thought we could be caregivers for my mom. It would, we learned really quick that just is a skill set, a very valuable skill set that we just didn't have.
When you said that, when you're like, oh my God, it felt like 10 years, like in my mind, because the time of it doesn't clock for me, but I was like, oh, she's going to tell me like 2 years. You're like 2 weeks. And I was like, oh
Are you
my
kidding?
God.
I mean, because think about it. So my sisters and I, we all had kids, and there weren't little kids, but they were still, some of them were still at home. And we basically would give up our lives multiple days a week to go work our shift. So we're a nurse, we're a caretaker, we are, helping my dad figure his stuff out. We're on the phone with Social Security, we're on the phone with the doctors, we're figuring out her medications. Like, when I tell you I was out of my wheelhouse, I was out of my freaking wheelhouse. Yeah. But we did it. And yeah, that 2 weeks or whatever it was, maybe it was a month. I've blocked it out. I don't know. But it felt like 10 years.
Yeah. And the other tip I would give listeners is don't assume once that magic 65 number kicks in that Medicare handles all of it, because there are a lot of intricacies to Medicare. I'm not even going to pretend to understand it, but I mean, Karen's right. Like, there's this whole big thing about Medicare doesn't pay for an in-home care. Like, period. End of story.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the hard conversations. Divide the responsibilities. Like, I was lucky. I was able to divide it 4 ways. I don't think we did it that well in the beginning, but we figured it out. Be realistic about what you can do, and be honest and upfront about that. Like, I felt like I tried to be, but I was not able in my family dynamic to stand up when everybody else is saying one thing. I did not know. I did not have the training for that in my family unit to be the one to stand up and say, I'm not doing that. So, don't be afraid to just be honest about what you're capable of, and then just do that.
Yep. And I think that was another place I had to come to. I remember talking to a really good friend of mine. Actually, she's going to be coming up on an episode. My good friend Alex Casillas, she's going to be on an episode about trauma. And I remember talking to her and just saying, I just feel so guilty because, like, I had a good childhood. My parents raised me, like, they sent me to school, like, I had 3 square meals and more, like, they provided for me. Like, I just feel like I don't have any room to complain. And she was like, Lisa, that's the job. Like, when you decide to become a parent, that's the job. You do all of those things. That's literally the job description. Okay. So you don't owe him. You don't owe him to pay him back from all this. This is what he took on. Right. And I'm firmly aware that there are parents that abdicate those responsibilities either right away or partially through lives. Like, I get that that's a whole thing as well. But I would really caution listeners to really, it's tricky, but start separating like duty, responsibility, like boundaries, all these things. It is just magnified like a billion degrees when you go through this. And I literally, this therapist that I have now, I haven't been with her very long, but like when I was interviewing, I shut up and I was like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of work on myself. Like, there's probably not a lot of deep, dark corners we need to look in. Like, I just really need some support because I'm balancing all these things. Right. And it's like our little inside joke. She's like, oh, really? Okay. Silly me.
Well, and I think also to piggyback on what you said, I was told by a member of my family, this is what you do. They raised us. This is what you do. And I get it, in different cultures.
Yep.
However many hundreds of years ago
100%.
when everybody was kind of on a compound,
Mhm.
when you were with the grandparents
Yep.
and the kid, you were all together,
Yep.
then sure, it's easier to caretake. It's easier. But because of our Western lives, it's not always like that. So the expectation that you are supposed to drop everything in your life, all your people, your family, your job, your responsibilities, everything, and go take care of them is an unrealistic expectation. And to get it from your family members is a challenge.
We don't
and I
live
had
in
to work through that.
totally get it. We don't live in multi-generational situations anymore. And my brother and I have had to work out a lot. Like that relationship was not rock solid, to put it mildly. And I think that we have worked really well together because we've kind of had to, but I also think that we have had to support each other with just this crazy train stuff that we're dealing with, and it helps. I mean, like Karen said, like you have to work a lot of stuff out, but boy, try to get everyone on the same page, or at least like in the same chapter, because good God, this stuff is going to come at you fast and furious. And that's also another extraneous hurt and injury and grief process that you really want to avoid if you can.
I think the one takeaway I want listeners to walk away with is you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say no to the things that don't feel good. You are allowed to say no to the things that you feel like you should do or you're obligated to do, right? No, you get to say no. You are a compassionate, loving person. Just because you set boundaries does not mean you are a bad daughter. And you have to say no because you cannot do it all. I know we try, and I know, we're good at it sometimes, but sometimes those balls, we cannot keep them all in the air. So it's super important. It is of paramount importance that you take care of yourself when you're caregiving your parents, and also just being a parent yourself. You're caregiving on both ends, and you're probably caregiving your partner too, if we could be honest, on some level.
Look, there's only so much cheese you can squeeze into the panini before it starts seeping out and burning, and you're scraping it off. Yeah, scraping it off the stove and the counter with a freaking razor blade to get it off. Like, let's be real. So at some point, that is just going to squish out. I feel like this is a topic we might come back to at some point. Boy, we would love to hear from you about your experiences and share. One of our dreams is to be able to have like a Q&A episode when people are reaching out and sharing their experiences. I would love for this to be our first one. And just, you don't have to have the answers. I mean, good God. If you were expecting this episode to be us having all the answers, let me tell you, I think you're sorely disappointed at this point. But just, again, to be in community with each other and share experiences so that you don't feel like you're alone. That's what I feel like.
Nobody has it all figured out. Newsflash. No. Nobody has it all figured out. We are all just freaking figuring it out together. And now you have a direct line to us. Our fabulous show notes are going to come to you via email. You need to sign up for the Pod Squad, and then you get all the goodness, all the episodes, you get the show notes, all the resources we give. And you get to reply back and say, hey, this is my experience with caregiving, or this is what I'm curious about, or can you do an episode on this?
Yeah.
Because like Lisa said, we want to be in this community with you.
I think one of our big goals for this year of second year of Drinks with the Girls, is to really intentionally build this community. And Karen and I have talked about ways to do that. So that's a big reason why we're moving to the show notes being available through the Pod Squad. So we promise we're not going to spam you. You're not going to get like crazy merch about like, we can fix your car window or like whatever. Like, we're not going to sell the list. We just literally want to have a way to build this community that's intentional and start that dialogue.
So you know the drill. Like, share, comment, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. And we will see you next time here at Drinks with the Girls. Cheers.
Cheers.